Hi. All right. I guess I'm going to start this off with a piece of advice that I received that I think is really bad. And that is to aim your brand at anybody who could possibly buy it to be able to maximize your revenues and your margins. And that is, frankly, really crappy advice.
Ooh, and Deb, you got to, who the heck are you and why should we listen to you?
Yeah, well, I'm the branding as sex and irrational loyalty person. So my parents are really proud that I've become the sex lady, but actually, I'm a brand strategist, best-selling author, speaker, and I also run a brand strategy, market research, and marketing agency.
Awesome. Awesome. So, who gave you that crappy advice, Deb? When did you get that? I mean, that obviously is the opposite of that has obviously served you, but where'd you get that?
I want to say in early marketing roles in B2B technology companies that I did before I moved to the agency side of the business, and certainly before I started my own company, in selling and growing account relationships and marketing, I was given the advice to fish where the fish are. And, fishing where the fish are sometimes means that you're going to pull up, a tire from the bottom of the ocean or the lake, or you might pull up a piece of broken glass, or you might pull up a fish, but it's a lot of wasted time. It's a lot of wasted effort. And the biggest thing that I learned is that not every brand is for every person.
So, we should pick where we fish, or we should pick the fish, or both?
We should pick the fish and then find out where those fish are.
All right. I'm guessing that's how we get to irrational loyalty, right? Is we pick the right fish that resonate with us. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can explain briefly what irrational
Yeah.
loyalty is. So, irrational loyalty is this condition where people are so indelibly bonded to your brand that they'd feel like they were cheating on it if they were to use something else. It's the condition that makes price not matter. It creates this standard of loyalty and advocacy that the best brands in the world have. It protects you in the most difficult and turbulent of times. Here's where that comes from, and that really is this notion that we have all of these great interpersonal relationships in our lives. Could be with a spouse, could be with a best friend, could be with a child. And when we behave on brand, I'm using air quotes for that, when we behave on brand for those relationships, we make deposits into an emotional bank account that we share. Right. And as we get to know each other and as we treat each other with kindness and goodness and express gratitude to each other, that bank account grows well into the positive. And that's the thing that protects you when one of those people in that relationship does a shitty job of loading the dishwasher. And by the way, the fork tines go pointing up, right? So I have a daughter. She's 24 years old. She lives in New York City. She sometimes comes to visit me at home in Austin, Texas. She leaves a wet towel on the floor of the bathroom, or God forbid, on her bed, which I absolutely hate. It is irrational loyalty, which is the thing that prevents me from kicking her out on her ass. Right. So that condition is available for brands, and that's every brand, whether it's a brand that serves other businesses, it serves consumers, it's for big companies, small companies, brands with low prices and low margins, brands with high prices and high margins. And this is a relationship that's been modeled pretty much in every category in every geography of the world.
Okay. So that seems pretty obvious to me when you say it, right? That we
You'd be
should do
surprised how many
that.
people don't see how obvious it is.
Yeah. So why though? Like why? That's exactly what I was going to say, right? Like it seems when you say it that it's really obvious. Is it just because we don't have any awareness of it, or is it because we really don't believe that it's true?
I think it's a combination of both. Conventional wisdom, like the whole fish where the fish are idea, like go and find some fish and like drop your line in there and catch as many fish as you possibly can. That's about growing the top line of your business, right? You're not going to create these long term relationships that develop that condition of irrational loyalty that way, because maybe the people who experience the brand, whatever that brand is, whether it's a product or service, maybe they're not perfectly suited for the brand. Therefore, you can't really create that condition of irrational loyalty. It's a little bit like dating. And so organizations that are wholly focused on just growing top line revenue without looking at what is the long term big picture impact on margins and growth and scale are the ones who miss out on this idea of irrational loyalty. And during the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, we really, really saw like kind of a doubling down on this irrational loyalty. And and it's still going on. So if you look at maybe some of the products and services, take like maybe your favorite restaurant, which for a time, or your favorite local retailer, which for a time was shut down, that you would be willing to do anything for them to ensure that they were successful coming out of the pandemic. They have in a way sort of extended this condition of irrational loyalty. If you have those feelings about that particular brand, that service, that product, whatever, then you are probably the ideal customer. And so the counterintuitive thing about branding is focusing your brand on the single human being. So not like a building full of people or a room full of people or a department of people, but the single human being who is most highly predictive of your success as an organization, the one who is the most profitable to serve, the one that makes it so that the people in your company are not sitting at their desks, rocking back and forth, grabbing the wild turkey out of their desk drawer, those kinds of things. Those customers, the ones that your brand is specifically built for, are the ones that are going to help you scale your organization, not just the top line, but in a profitable, satisfying, and frankly fun way.
Cool. So we all want to do that. I would think, right? If we know that, we all want to do that. So how though? How do we find out who the heck that profitable one is? Because frankly, right, I just want more business, Deb. I just want to make more money.
Yeah, and that's it is the most counterintuitive thing that I talk about and that I do with our customers, and that we train people to do, is like focusing on a singular individual, because choice is hard, right? You just want business. You just want to sell as much stuff as you possibly can, right? Especially if you're in your sales role, because that's how you're compensated. That's how you're specifically oriented. It's in your DNA. It's like imprinted on the double helix, right? And so the idea of focusing your brand on a singular ideal customer to the exclusion of other people seems counterintuitive. Here's where it is magic, and here's where you do it. So people buy things from people, right? They don't buy things from a building or, like an amorphous cloud of things, right? People buy things from people. And there is a singular individual human being inside of every house, every business, every fire station, every government, every school, whatever, who is ideally suited for what it is that you are selling. And how you figure out who that person is if you have experience, like if you have brand experience, look to the clients and customers that you've done business with, the ones who historically have bought the most from you, have been the most pleasurable and the easiest to serve, the ones who are most profitable, the ones who advocate for you, and then figure out, is there a human being? And this is especially poignant and easy for services businesses, but is there a human being that you're like, if I could just have 30 more customers just like this person, I could grow my business profitably and rapidly, and in a way that gives me less headaches. That's a really great place to start. Then you go through the exercise of understanding not just their demographic or firmographic perspective. So I've worked with a lot of companies who have said, for instance, this is a brand for busy moms. Well, I could ask a room full of 1,000 busy moms. I'm like, all right, busy moms, raise your hand if you're a busy mom. You get 1,000 hands raised, right? But then ask them questions like, what is the age of your kids? All right, well, if you have kids under 4, it's a different kind of busyness. I describe myself as a busy mom. I'm busy not being a mom right now because my kid is 24 years old, yet I wake up every day thinking, how am I going to F this up this morning, right? Understanding the underlying psychographic, attitudinal, behavioral characteristics of that person, really taking a walk in their shoes and understanding what it is that they're trying to create for their lives, what is meaningful to them. So having like a wide range of who this product is for makes it so that you're hitting a lot of people who may not necessarily resonate with your message. Just, think of that example of 1,000 busy moms. Busy moms with kids over 15 are very different than busy moms with kids that are, under 1 or under 4 or during the school years. There are lots of different conditions going on. And it's more, like I said, it's more than just the demographic or say firmographic characteristics. It really is, what are their hopes, fears, dreams, desires? What makes them feel sexy? What makes them sit bolt upright in bed and sweat ice cubes every night? And how then can you permeate not just their minds and their wallets, but most importantly, their hearts? How can you develop this deep, loving relationship with them? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense, right? Finding out what's meaningful to them and then what makes them feel the way that you want them to feel and the way they want to feel, right? That lining that up, right? That I love that. I think that's super important. You're going to say some more. I'm going to stop.
Yeah, I was going to say sometimes it's helpful for me to give an example of how this
Yeah.
works.
Yep.
Nike is a really good consumer brand. It's sold all over the world. Pretty well known what Nike stands for. Like Nike is about stimulating that inner dialogue, with the inner elite athlete inside of all of us, right? Just do it is, that's a mantra, and greatness has no peak is kind of their manifesto. Nike's ideal customer, believe it or don't, is not a middle-aged woman from Austin, Texas who likes running shoes, which would be me. And I buy from them pretty irrationally loyal to the Nike brand. Their ideal customer is this elite athlete who happens to be a 19-year-old man who is like getting to the peak of his greatness. Yet the Nike brand is the Nike brand is the Nike brand is the Nike brand, regardless of where you find it. So whether it's a high school athletic director, it's middle-aged recreational athlete from Austin, Texas, it's a professional golfer, it's the NCAA, it's the NFL, it's you, it's me, whatever. The Nike brand has a through line through all of us. Their ideal customer may not be us. The Nike brand gets all of us, but they aim the brand, and the brand is consistent. And the consistent through line really is that ideal customer that is always, always, always at the core. So the argument that I get from clients when we say we need to focus on a singular ideal archetypal customer to aim the brand, it doesn't mean that segment marketing and selling is dead. It means it's giving your brand this relentless focus and a platform from which it can scale, right? So having that focus and having that brand be clear across all of those different audiences. When you see the Nike brand, Phil, the Nike brand is the Nike brand is the Nike brand, regardless of where you see it, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And so it really is this notion of the ideal customer at the core that anchors that and gives you that focus. So if you were to look at a list, I look at this list every year of the 100 top most valuable global brands. It's a study done by Interbrand every year where they conduct a study and they model the relationship of brand strength to the overall valuation of a company. What is the contribution of brand to the overall valuation of the company? You look at that list of 100 brands, you can go brand by brand by brand, and you can say, this is who this brand is for. This is who this brand is for. This is who this brand is for. And there's not a single brand on there that is for everyone.
So good. So good. So, okay. So we picked our customers, but now we got to get them to pick us, right? I mean, we got to be human, and right. So if we're dating, you're not gonna date my coffee cup, right? That's a Tervis, and
I mean,
that's
I might.
Not how this works.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, that
love
depends,
coffee.
right? Well, you do, right? But let's, how do we show up then as a brand so that we're attractive to those that we want to attract?
So the best brands in the world are the ones that become part of the people who use them. Let that sit there for a second. The best brands in the world, they become part of the people who use them. They become part of a person's very identity. What you eat, what you drink, what you wear, what you drive, the fact that you are drinking out of a Tervis coffee cup and not a Yeti tells me something about you, right? Something about your choices. If I told you that I drove here today, actually, I didn't drive here, I live here. But if I told you that I showed up at the office in a Ford F-150 truck, immediately you have an idea. You know something about me. You know something about my values and my beliefs and what's important to me. So if I drive a Ford F-150 truck versus I show up here in a Tesla, like you have formed an opinion of me. When people choose things that they use, that they throw down money, that they put their support behind, it ties to their very values and beliefs. It is part of their core identity. So if I were wearing a shirt today that said, I love the Yeti brand. Let's say, for instance, I was wearing a shirt that said Yeti. I mean, like, talk about a brand. It's totally a lifestyle brand. People don't even have Yeti equipment yet wear Yeti t-shirts and hats. Like, when you can get people to walk around with your brand logo on their clothing, then you know that you have cracked this code of becoming part of people's identities. So it says something about you to other people, but also more importantly to yourself. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs basically says that we are all on this path to self-actualization. What we buy, what we wear, what we eat, what we drink, what we drive, the services that we hire for our companies are all part of our ascension up this pyramid. because it becomes part of our identity. It helps us satisfy needs. It helps us be part of a group. So the best brands in the world really, really become part of them. The second thing that they do is those best brands in the world, the ones that are the most successful, the most valuable, the ones that contribute the most value to their customers, they're not just different, they're unique. They have to be meaningfully different. And the only kind of meaningful differentiation is uniqueness or singularity. So the first thing, they become part of the person who uses them. The second thing, they're unique, they're singular. And then the third thing is they make their customers a hero in their own story, right? I told you we're all ascending Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So whether you're buying software for your business, or you're buying nuts and screws for your construction company, or you're buying a new car, or you're buying, a coffee tumbler, that is all part of this journey that your ideal customer is on, where they get to be the hero. They're the protagonist. They stand on top of the hill. They plant the flag. They cheer. They get the guy. They get the girl. Whatever. They take a roll in the hay. That's the branding is sex thing, and your brand gets to be part of it.
Interesting. That's so interesting. And I don't want to diverge too far here, but I have a Tervis mug because it's the only one that I can get with the Navy logo on it.
Ah, very
right?
good.
Because
okay.
I'm a service member, right? So I was prior service, right? But I have a Yeti mug. And funny enough, I have a Contigo mug as well. And for me, right, you talk about identity, right? I identify with this.
You identify with naval service, right?
That's right.
Obviously, you want to show that to the world. You're using this on your broadcast today. Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
It's part of who you are.
Yeah. And then I have an orange Yeti mug because they're the only ones that I found that has an orange that I actually like.
Right.
So I have an orange one for that.
And that orange is part of your brand.
That's right. Yep, right? That's right. Yep. And then the Contigo mug, right, is I guess a little more safe. It locks. It doesn't leak all over the place. And I guess I want to make sure that I don't leak all over people. I don't know if that's probably not part of the brand, but that's so interesting.
It is part of the brand. What you're talking about, like, let's take the Contigo mug, for instance, right? So the things that you mentioned, it locks, it's safe, it doesn't leak. You don't want to leak all over people, figuratively or literally, right? Those are what we refer to as functional benefits, what the brand is, what the brand does. So when you think about any kind of coffee mug that's going to keep your coffee hot and it's going to be something that you can drink out of that's not going to like drip down your front or whatever, there are certain baseline characteristics that it has to have, or else people are never going to even consider it, right? So if you're talking about a car that's like the wheels, a steering wheel, power steering, power door locks, power windows, I'm old enough to have purchased a car where I paid extra for those things. They're now standard equipment, right? You wouldn't even consider, if you bought a 21, 22 model vehicle, you wouldn't even consider it if it didn't have Bluetooth as a standard feature. So when you differentiate your products on the basis of exclusively those functional benefits, like it doesn't leak, it locks, I don't dribble when I drink out of it, then you're opening yourself up to competition from all other commodities that are basically competing on the same elements. And so what I'm talking about here, those functional benefits, I talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, brands have their own hierarchy of needs, which is called the brand values pyramid. At the bottom of that pyramid, sort of like in Maslow's hierarchy, which is food, water, shelter, air, the ability to procreate, basically going to sleep at night and not being afraid you're going to get eaten by a bear. At the bottom of that pyramid are those things. At the bottom of the brand pyramid are the functional benefits, the things that it has to have, or people won't even consider it. So when you go to the store and you're like, what kind of thermal coffee mug do I want? It needs to be thermal. It needs to keep the coffee hot. It needs to, have a lid. It has to have some mechanism for me to drink from. It has to look good in my hand. And, at a baseline, I want to not be embarrassed by using it, right? In the middle of the pyramid, which are equivalent to, like in Maslow's hierarchy, like belongingness needs, which are affiliation needs, and then esteem needs, are things like, I like that it is orange. It has an emotional benefit to me that it ties to this orange that is part and parcel of my brand, which tells the story of who I am and what Phil stands for, right? Or I'm able to get the Navy logo on this, right? So we call those emotional benefits. Those are the bells and whistles. Those things can also be imitated. I know that you picked the Tervis mug because it had the naval thing on it, but you know what? You could go get a mug from Cafe Press and send them the Navy logo and they'll print it on there, right? So the things in the middle of the pyramid, anything that's a bell, a whistle, a feature can be imitated by other people. And as soon as you make it standard equipment for your line, it becomes standard equipment for the entire category. Look at cars, power door locks, power windows, power steering. Sometime back in the 80s, they made that standard equipment. I think it was Chrysler. Now you don't even consider it. You shop online today. If you can't get free overnight shipping, you're like, I'm going to put it in my shopping cart and I'm going to go elsewhere and see if I can find free shipping, right?
Yeah.
Baseline today's options packages are tomorrow's baseline requirements. And it's very, very important that you create a brand that transcends those things. The way to transcend those things is by becoming part of someone's identity. That's all those things. They're very esoteric, but these are the connection to the values and beliefs, the self expressive benefits of the brand. The what does it say about Phil that he uses this mug stuff? I know something about you. I know you're loyal. I know you're proud. I hardly know you. We had one phone conversation before this interview, right? But
Yep.
am I correct? You're loyal, you're
Yeah.
proud, you're
Sure.
patriotic, you're honorable, you're tough minded, you're probably very practical. I mean, these are all things that I know about you just by your choices. And so the best brands in the world, when they aim their brand at that singular ideal archetypal customer, they understand their values and beliefs and they can anchor their brand directly against those things. And the magic for marketing here, by getting to the top of the pyramid and being a fully self-actualized brand that becomes part of someone's identity, is that you can message directly towards that because your brand is about them. It's not about you. So Tervis's message to you about that Navy mug probably is not, this is a good mug and you won't spill on yourself. The message is probably express your pride, right?
Yeah.
Express your
Sure.
pride. Show your support and your toughness, making the message about the user rather than about them. Tervis is not selling mugs by saying our mugs are the most durable plastic imprintable mugs that you can buy, right?
Right.
Yeti
That's right.
certainly is not selling mugs that way. Yeti is like, you drink out of this mug and you are going to go on an outdoor adventure. You are the most adventurous human being on earth. You can create a documentary of you climbing and snowboarding Mount Everest when you use Yeti products, right?
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Wow. So much there. So the good news is, friends, we're going to give you a link to those couple things that Deb talked about. You'll get the brand actualization thing. She's giving it away for us. So that's exciting. I'll share that at closer to the end, and I'll drop it in the comments too, in the show notes and stuff. But Deb, all right, got all that right.
Yeah.
I picked my right. I picked my fish. I made it about them. I've got some self actualization of who my customer is, what they want, and my own brand self actualization. But damn it, Deb, I got to write content now. I got to
Yes.
create stuff, right? And this is how you and I hooked up, right? Our buddy Dave Lorenzo says, "Hey, Deb, you are brilliant at writing content." And then I look at your stuff. I'm like, yes, she is.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So how do we do that, right? How do we make that, niche it down, make it practical, tactical, so that once we do those things, now we can create content that people feel is amazing and just for them?
Right. So one of the things that sort of surrounds this conversation is this idea that probably close to 90% of the content on the internet never gets seen by a single human being, right? When you figure out who your ideal customer is and where they live on the internet, you can aim your content directly at them, both in the strategy and the message, and then thirdly in like where it actually gets. So the purpose of content, like I always like to go back to, like, what is the purpose of content? Well, content serves marketing. Marketing literally means to create a market. If you look at the Merriam-Webster definition of marketing, it means to bring buyers and sellers together. It's not selling. Content and marketing is about creating a market, and you use content to do a couple things. Content is designed to create a halo of awareness so that people understand who you are and they can mention you off the top of their heads. So the rule of 7 in marketing means that people need to be exposed to something at least 7 times to register any kind of recall. Today, with the proliferation of markets and media, it's probably closer to 20. This rule of 7 has been around since I was in business school. So your content needs, like, it needs to be prolific, it needs to be out there, and it needs to be designed to create this halo of awareness so that when people do need you, you are on the top of their mind. Another stat for people who are keeping track is this idea that the strongest predictor of whether or not people will buy your brand is whether they can mention it off the top of their head, right? This is a relationship that's been modeled, across every category. So here's an example. When I ask you, Phil, to think about like what's a brand of canned soup that you can buy at the regular grocery store, what comes to the top of your mind?
Campbell's.
Campbell's. Okay, what's the number one brand of canned soup sold in the regular grocery store?
Yeah,
Campbell's.
it's
Not a
probably
trick
Campbell's.
question, right? So
Yeah.
you go down the grocery store aisle, it's a Campbell's soup aisle, right? And then there's a couple of other soups, but it's all Campbell's soup, right? So it does translate to market share. So content is designed to do that. So going back to your question of like, how do you do that? I just want to explain like why and how all these branding things fit into it. And then I can talk a little bit about my own experience and just making sure that content's out there. So we're creating a market. We're using content for the first purpose is to create that halo of awareness so that people know you off the top of their mind. Second purpose for content is to drive inbound interest to your brand. Third purpose of content is to nurture people through the process of using or reusing your brand. When I create content, I keep all of that in mind. And I also have in my mind my brand strategy. Who is my brand for? How does my brand become part of the people who use it? How is it singular? And how do I make my customer a hero in their own story? And I use that brand framework to create the content. And I look across all of the available messages that I could be putting out there in the world, and I focus it on one thing. I focus my awareness, consideration, and preference building content on the goal of inspiring people to create irrational loyalty for their brands. I am the irrational loyalty person. I like focus on that one thing. And then I create a strategic plan, a go-to-market strategy, if you will, that is attached directly to that brand and what I know about my ideal customer and her journey of being the chief marketing officer of a fast-growing enterprise technology company. And I make sure that she has my content at every step of the way. So I start with the customer, I anchor it with the overarching strategy and with the brand, and then I create a long-term editorial calendar that has content that hits on every point in her journey from awareness to image building to consideration to purchase to repurchase. And I make sure that I have content that's going to be at all of those different points of her journey. So first, anchor it in the brand. Second, anchor it in the strategy. Third, understand that ideal customer's journey, how they become aware of stuff, how they consider stuff, when they need to be reminded, all of those kinds of things, and use that as a framework. And then I use my brand strategy and my brand platform to identify like what are the pieces of content that I need. And I create a plan and I work to a plan and I hold myself accountable and we manage content for me, like for my personal brand, my authority brand, we manage that like it's an account for the agency, right? It's like, it's a job. Creating content and getting it out there is a job. Now, it sounds like a lot of work for a person who writes books, who speaks, who runs a couple of businesses, who also likes to ski every afternoon. I have helpers. There's lots of help out there. There's lots and lots of help out there. If you bake everything into the strategic foundation of your brand and you have a brand platform and messaging architecture, which is the answers to those three questions. What does it say about a person that they use this brand? What's the one thing they get from this brand they can't get from anyone else? How do you make them a hero in their own story? And you line that up with who that ideal customer is. You bring those things together and you can hire copywriting resources who can help you translate your content, create outlines. You can create outlines for them and say, I need a blog post on this particular thing, and here's how I want to activate that. Here's my brand framework. Here's my point of view. I literally get on with the people who create content for me, and I do a verbal download. I'm like, here's my point of view on this thing, blah, 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 whatever. They know my voice. They know what I have to say about it, and they can turn that into whatever content deliverable it needs to be plugged into. Last thing I want to say about this, because I've been talking for like 15 minutes straight. Last thing I want to say about this is that even though I have an editorial calendar and a content plan and like a year's worth of evergreen content planned out, I also give myself the flexibility to be part of the market level conversation that's going on day to day. This has been the key to my success in creating content and like establishing a big footprint of authority. That is, I pay attention to what's going on in the world, right? There are branding stories around us every single freaking day, right? Like, what was the one hashtag West Elm? I can't remember what his name is, but the dating profile guy, he said he was a designer for West Elm, and he told everyone that he went out with, and West Elm was like, no, he doesn't work for us. And then other brands were like hopping on the bandwagon. That's a branding story, right? I can have a point of view on that. I have something that I can say about that. I can create my own content around that. I can pitch media about that and say, hey, you're a brand, you see a branding trend going on. Should you or shouldn't you jump onto the bandwagon? Here are all the reasons why you should. Here are the reasons why you shouldn't. When you do, here are the things to have. And like, I have like a standard pitch for that. About 50% of the content that I create is that sort of flexible, they call it newsjacking, but like
Yep.
really being part of that market level dialogue. So quick case study on that. Back in 2016, when my first book came out, Branding is Sex, I didn't know how I wanted that big piece of content to serve me in my business. I just was compelled to write a book, right? Turns out it was a nice book and it worked out. But in early 2017, there was like a shit show going on in the world. We had Pepsi with that really bad Kendall Jenner ad that seemed to suggest that you could cure all of society's ills by sharing a Pepsi with a cop at a whitewashed version of the Black Lives Matter thing, right? We
Yep.
also had United Airlines that pulled that poor Dr. David Dow out of an airplane seat and, made him bloody. And it was like the tweet heard around the world. We had Sean Spicer. I mean, it all happened over a course of about 2 weeks. I was like, I have something to say about all of these things. And over the course of those 2 weeks, I created so much content, plus was able to get media coverage. I think I talked to something close to 140 reporters over the course of 2 weeks, got many hits, everything from New York Times and Washington Post, all the way down through travel publications, marketing and advertising publications, and things like that. That sort of was the shot fired around the world. That content, here's the magic, folks. This is how you can really exponentially grow your content and authority footprint. All that content is third-party validated content. You get a story placed in the Washington Post where you get the last word. That little clip becomes part of an email newsletter that you send out to your existing subscriber list. You can repurpose it with a link on a social media post. You can do a video about it and feature it. So every piece of content can be atomized, repurposed, retooled, reused, that can rapidly grow your authority footprint. So you have that combination, about 50% evergreen content, about 50% newsjacking, or actually just being part of that market level conversation. And those things work together.
Wow. That's awesome. That's so much. So Deb's first book is Branding is Sex. Second book is Irrational Loyalty. That's what she does, who she is, all about irrational loyalty. And Deb, I gotta ask though, you gave us so much. Where do we get started? How do we start on this journey to irrational loyalty, or even to just figuring out like, what the heck do I do now? Because you've dropped so much.
Yeah. So I provide a lot of resources for people. I do recommend, if this is something that you're really interested in, like really trying to figure out how do I uncover this condition of irrational loyalty for my brand, one of the best places to start is by reading Branding as Sex. It has a cheeky title, but there's serious business content in there. That is a how-to book. I basically have written a book that gives away the proven proprietary methodology that I've used in my company for 18 years to create and manage and relaunch thousands of household name brands and emerging brands, et cetera. That is kind of the how-to book. That will give you the basis of the whole methodology. So these things that I talked about, like ideal customer archetype, brand values pyramid, those 3 brand questions, plus some things on brand archetype, brand personality, like really dialing it in, are all in there. That's a really good place to start. It's also available in audiobook. If you're not too irritated by hearing my voice, I read my own audiobooks. So that's a really good place to start. But also, I've provided a bunch of free resources on my website, which is debgabor.com. So if you go debgabor.com, digital downloads, there's also like you can click in the navigation. I think it says resources, and there's a drop down. You go straight to digital downloads. Every one of these pieces of the methodology that's covered in Branding is Sex and what I talked about here, plus some bonus things, those are all available for free download with instructions so that you can actually give it a whirl, try it yourself. I feel so strongly about this idea that uncovering these conditions of irrational loyalty can open up new conceptual and financial territory for your brand that I will give it to everybody. So it's available for free. Go get it. Here's the other thing, and that is I will talk to anybody. You want to go download your worksheets and like try to fill them out yourself, and you want to do like a little consultation with me, hit me up on that website at debgabor.com and remind me where we met. So tell everybody that you saw me in Phil's content here, just so that I know to give you the special royal touch treatment. And we can do a short consultation. But I think part of the reasons why I have so much content, I create so much content, is because it is literally a compulsion for me. I can't not brand. And if you read Branding is Sex or listen to Branding is Sex, I compare myself to legendary basketball coach John Wooden, which is funny for a 5'1", 100 and nothing pound woman. But Coach Wooden always said he couldn't not coach. Like, he'd be driving down the mean streets of LA and he'd see kids with shitty hand position on the neighborhood courts, and he would jump out of the car and he'd go over and correct their hand position. I am like that about branding, and I'm on a mission to transform 1 million brands. And I can't do that without giving some of this stuff away for free. So there you go.
Wow. Holy crap. Holy crap. So here's the thing. If you go to Deb's website, if you go to debgabor.com/digital-downloads, this is all available. You don't have to sign up for a newsletter. You sign up, check it out. But I would tell you, read her content. Deb, it's great stuff. You dropped a ton of stuff today. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for teaching us that branding is sex, and that irrational loyalty is ultimately something worth achieving. But it's some work. So get to work, folks. Check it out. Get to know Deb. Thank you, Deb, for spending time with me today.
Thank you. And thank you for introducing me to your audience. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.